Hey, Vsauce, Michael here.
Hello and welcome to ArmA 3 Cold War Rearmed. More specifically, it's some mod Cold War Crisis campaign, which brings the campaign of Operation Flashpoint Cold War Crisis to ArmA 3. For some quick context, Operation Flashpoint, the first, originally released in 2001, published under Codemasters with Bohemia Interactive as the developers. After the two had a falling out, Bohemia named their sequels ArmA, while Codemasters kept the original name of the series, or Operation Flashpoint, to themselves. Nowadays, the 2001 game is still available for purchase on Steam, though it's been renamed ArmA Cold War Assault. ArmA 3 was released in 2013, so we're looking at a 12-year jump in between the two games, but then the mod itself was released in 2021 for the 20th anniversary of Operation Flashpoint, so we're looking actually at a 20-year jump. To point out some differences between the two games, unlike in Operation Flashpoint, in ArmA 3 you can swim, heal yourself without being a medic, use smoke grenades for concealment, have multiple saves, and also the graphics are better. No surprise on that one. Campaign length? 12 hours. For reference, the Eastwind campaign, as in the vanilla campaign, is around 7 to 8 hours long, while the Spooky Alien DLC campaign is between 6 to 8 hours long if you complete all the side content, though you can complete it in half the time if you're willing to skip all of that. What follows? My heavily edited playthrough of the campaign. If you have already played Operation Flashpoint, the mod makes very few changes to the campaign, or the mod itself, or you plan to play it and you do not want any spoilers, you can skip ahead to the review section. We're not going to go over every mission as that will take too long, but I will go over the general plot, which is unchanged from the original game, and certain missions that are of high importance. The campaign starts in Malden, with you playing as Private David Armstrong, who is a US soldier stationed there. To set things up, it is 1985, Gorbachev has just come to power in the Soviet Union, the squaddies are listening to the radio, and then the commander calls them up to train, aka do the tutorial mission, which is more of a cutscene if anything, because the mod makers removed most of the tutorial fluff, before they get shipped back to the United States in a week. That won't be happening. In case you wanted even more not very subtle foreshadowing, our squad mates talk about unknown forces on Everon, and then the colonel tells us to be ready for anything, even for war. And what do you guess, a training camp on Everon comes under attack by unknown forces and off to war we go. We are shipped off to Everon to investigate and promptly start a fight with the Soviet army. Sorry, I meant to say unknown forces that look conspicuously Russian and all wear Russian uniforms and use Russian equipment. The Americans do well against Soviet infantry and light armor. Having brought air and armor assets of their own, we still have to run away from any tanks because this is ArmA and trying to fight AI tanks frontally is infantry is instant death. But things are going well.
Does anyone copy? I am under heavy fire at location Delta Charlie 6-4. Urgent assistance required. Respond. Repeat. Am under heavy fire location.
God damn it, let's go. All units report immediately to center of village.
Then the colonel we've been speaking with for the past 4 missions gets ambushed and we go rescue him.
Dismount.
That looks like the lieutenant's jeep. Jeez, what a mess.
Except he's already dead by the time we get there and things only get worse. Shortly after we take Montignac over the course of the next mission, American command decides they can no longer cope with the casualties and choose to pull back.
Standing by. Papa Bear to Black, back off. We have new orders. All U.S. Army personnel must withdraw from Everon. Back up, no longer assigned. They've been called away. Out. Papa Bear to all U.S. units. Code Foxtrot. Code Foxtrot. New orders. All U.S. personnel must withdraw from Everon. Out. Papa Bear to all units. Follow instructions for evacuation. Out.
Papa Bear, this is Alpha. We're still in Montignac. What should we do? Over.
Alpha, go straight through Provence to Morton. Move quickly. Out.
Papa Bear, Alpha here. The Blackhawk was destroyed. We're running out of options.
Alpha Squad, try to get to Morton by foot. We can't help you now. Out.
Gunship, hit the dirt. It's a hind. Take cover.
Which goes about as well as you would expect. After all, we are the protagonist of an army game. Now, what comes next is the soul-branching mission of the entire campaign. Canonically, our squad may survive the preceding mission until we take Montignac, after which we get the evacuation order and make it dash for the forest as a massive COVID counterattack bears down the Americans. However, if one fails to keep their teammates alive while taking Montignac, they will be ordered to pull back ahead of the evacuations and start a non-canonical mission, Strange Meeting. The fate of the Americans does not change, however, as the massive Soviet counterattack just instead comes as the player makes their way to Morton in a truck instead. I personally did not fail taking Montignac, so I proceeded with the canonical follow-up mission after Montignac, which is the hardest mission in the entire campaign. We start off alone in a forest while 4 squads of Soviet infantry accompanied by BMPs converge on our position. If that wasn't enough, more squads are patrolling the area around the forest, and a hind is in the air to send us straight to the underworld if we dare pop our head outside the forest. Personal pro tip if you play this mission? Make your way to the edge of the forest, hit the dirt, turn on time acceleration 4x, and crawl your way out to the evacuation point. Try anything else, you will die, trust me.
We're at Delta Delta 6-9. Looks like we'll make it. Out. Location Delta Foxtrot 6-5. We're okay. Out.
Not that our efforts will be rewarded though, as the Americans at Morton are soon overrun and give us an alternative rendezvous position for evacuation, which the Soviets get a hold of and capture us as soon as we make it to one. Thankfully, anti-Soviet guerrillas come to our rescue before long. Now enters Everon Freedom Alliance. In exchange for helping them rescue some hostages, they assist us in getting back to Malden. Well, they tried their brilliant idea of disguising as civilians, doesn't really work out. Still, Armstrong makes it off the island back to Malden, promising the resistance American support. Hey, I wonder if that means these guys will take part in more missions. No, they won't. They're not going to be irrelevant again. The Americans back on Malden are terrified of provoking the Soviets and getting their asses handed to them again, so the commander sends us off away to the furthest edge of the island as a guard. On our own. The game does explain that the Americans are severely undermanned with only about 200 personnel on the island, and our commander assures us that everything will be fine and nothing bad should happen. Reinforcements will come soon and save us all.
Eagle Eye 4 to base. We're getting some faint infrared signals down there on the ground. Looks like you could have guests. Over.
The next few missions see the Americans conduct a fighting retreat out of Salt Malden, and we also get to meet the second protagonist of the campaign, Robert Hammer. What the fuck was that? Basically, the tankman of the campaign, who starts off with a training mission turned urgent defense op. The Americans then try to do a counteroffensive and fail miserably. Shortly afterwards, we are also introduced to the third protagonist, James Gostovsky, who serves as the infiltrator / spec ops of the campaign through a quick sabotage mission. Said sabotage allows the Americans to finally stop losing, and over the course of the next few missions, the Soviets are pushed into the sea back to Everon. We then get to finally meet the big bad evil guy of the campaign, General Alexei Vasily Guba, who demands our surrender. His motivations are that he doesn't like Gorbachev, and taking these islands from the Americans will somehow convince the Soviets that Gorbachev sucks. Then they'll depose him and start World War III, obviously, which the Soviets will then win, obviously, or something along those lines. Regardless, now that we know Moscow isn't involved and Guba isn't getting any reinforcements, Armstrong gets the opportunity to go to Everon alongside Gostovsky to see how the rebels are doing. They are not doing well. In fact, they'll do even worse as the rebel base gets attacked shortly after Armstrong meets their commander, and no, you can't save them, trust me, I tried. The plot requires Armstrong to return to Malden, where he is promoted, meaning we now have to command a squad, which is the favorite activity of all ArmA players. Reinforcements have thankfully arrived, and the next few missions deal with a Soviet pocket on the northwestern side of Malden will basically serve as punching bags to get us used to squad leading. We also do a convoy protection mission that sucks extreme ass and hence will not be mentioned again. In any case, with the cat out of the bag, supplies delivered, it is time to return to Everon in force. Armstrong and co. secures the airfield in Everon with an amphibious assault, while Gostovsky destroys a whole bunch of helicopters on his own, proving himself more competent than literally anyone else on the island. Again. We then get to show the Soviets the power of a full down tier and rifle stomp them with an Abrams tank. Then it is finally time to meet the last protagonist of the campaign, the Sam Nichols, the Airman. Pilot missions in my ArmA campaign? More likely than you think. Anyways, a few simple transport and convoy blow up missions later, Soviet forces in Everon are basically collapsing and it's time to move on to the last island, Kolgujev, the smallest of the three. Regardless, it is heavily fortified, which means it's again time for Gostovsky to go in and destroy. In the meantime, the remaining Soviet forces in Everon are wiped out and their last stronghold on St. Pierre falls to a combined air and ground assault. It is time to take Kolgujev and end this conflict.
This is Thunder 3. I think I've got a problem, guys. Fuel's real low and I'm losing power in both engines. I'm gonna have to bail out.
Sorry, I meant fail miserably yet again, as the plot requires us to eject over enemy territory and get captured for the obligatory prison escape mission. Which is rendered extremely easy because the Soviets have left an unlocked BMP right next to our holding cell. How convenient! I didn't even have to wait for nighttime. Oh, and they also left their hind unlocked. How convenient! Hi. Hello. I just landed inside, bro. We get to play as Chotstovsky once again in the next mission where we stealthily destroy. Right, now we grab some documents from a residence belonging to Guba. The documents reveal Guba has nuclear weapons and he's going to start World War III because he couldn't beat the Americans on Malden. Great. It's up to Armstrong and co. to destroy the Scud before it can be launched. Welcome to the second hardest mission of the campaign. Enjoy getting ass blasted by Shilkas and BMPs, plus a T-72 for good measure. This mission is also the time mission the mod description refers to. Fail to destroy the Scud, everyone dies, and you get a bad ending. Quick pro tip, sacrifice reinforcements. The tanks are useless and probably won't make it to the fight, but the helicopters make for a good distraction, and you can hopefully kill the Scud afterwards. No, despite the commander's dialogue, their deaths do not impact future missions. In any case, to save the world, right? Campaign over. GG. Not so fast. We still need to capture Google before we can escape the island. The Soviets on Kolgujev are collapsing, but they still pose a threat. Luckily, Google only has 2 spots he can possibly escape from, being restricted to a boat as his only option remaining. So all we need to do is check whichever... Oh, is that an unlocked hind sitting in the middle of a field?
100 meters south.
After thoroughly blasting everything on Kolgujev to pieces, we return to Guba waiting hopelessly at his completely obliterated boat, and capture him without much resistance. But oh no, he's got another Scud missile that he is about to launch. We must quickly destroy it. What's his help? Regardless, we destroy the second Scud shortly afterwards, and this time the world is truly saved. Roll credits. And go have a drink at the bar with all of your friends. Excluding the rebel commander, trying to recruit him will result in a game-breaking bug because he gets stuck on top of his tower. Oh well. That's the campaign. Welcome back if you skipped the playthrough section. Let's go over what we played and review. What do I think of this mod? To start with, you need to be ready to download around 47 gigabytes of dependencies in order to play the mod, as it mostly depends on CUP, which represents 3/4 of the mod size, together with the dependencies. Quite a lot, but still less than a mod pack used for the average Zeus op. The assets that are in Cold War Rearmed itself, I would say, are of better quality graphically than Cup, though not at the level of RHS. Vehicle interiors, for example, are mostly missing, weapons look basic, but the uniforms and vests are of good quality. The maps do stick out as weak points. Everon, the focal point of the campaign, is probably the worst and varies between okay and just plain ugly. Kolgujev is fine in my opinion, but it's a small map and you only go there at the very end of the campaign for 8 missions out of 44 total, and 4 of those missions you're mainly going to use a helicopter or jet, so my opinion might be screwed here. Lastly, there's Malden, but that's from a free DLC and comes with ArmA 3, so disqualified. Audio is where I had the most problems. I wasn't wowed by the weapons. The sounds feel quite weak. I'm not 100% certain if the weapon sounds are the same as Operation Flashpoint or not. The worst is definitely audio balancing for dialogue because it doesn't exist. Guba, the main antagonist, is pretty much inaudible due to just how quiet his dialogue is, and that's when his dialogue even plays. Half the time the subtitles for him show up with no audio following behind it. He's easily the worst example, though most cutscenes suffer heavily from this lack of audio balancing, and the squad dialogue in early missions is also no exception. The allied commander in charge and the main protagonists are the only ones that are consistently audible, and the protagonists are only so because ArmA proximity voice works in the sense that the further away you are, the quieter your voice gets. Besides that, you only hear other characters well when they speak on the radio because that gives them a volume boost. This does have to do somewhat with ArmA considering non-radio speech to be general effects and grouping it with the same audio as gunfire, which is far louder than speech, so I'm not 100% certain if this is fully fixable. Now, for how the mod has adapted the original campaign to ArmA 3, the mod makes very few changes to the original campaign. The biggest changes are just removing redundant tutorial elements, so pretty much everything from the original game down to enemy placements is the same. Even the original soundtrack is imported and plays at appropriate times during missions, which I personally really like. But if you played the original game, you know what to expect at every turn. It is the exact same, though just in ArmA 3. For example, there are almost no locked vehicles in the campaign, just like in the original game, even if it would make sense to lock those vehicles in a real-life scenario, or in any ArmA 3 mission, really. There are no complex cutscenes, no complex missions, however the missions can be difficult and unforgiving. Safe scumming is pretty much expected, if not required. The mod makers themselves encourage you to do it. Remember, all of this comes straight from 2001. To put it bluntly, you should not expect a bombastic campaign like Eastwind. On the other hand, Cold War Crisis campaign is much less infantry focused than Eastwind, and you get to play as both air and armored in a number of missions. Those said missions are generally simple with only a few, or even a single objective at times, and there's unsurprisingly no persistent loadout system. We have multiple protagonists to begin with anyway. Bugs-wise, there is nothing game-breaking except for the epilogue, where the hidden objective is currently bugged, though I did at times manage to break a mission's pacing by completing objectives in advance without knowing, and then I had to reload. Thankfully we have multiple saves, and I spotted localization errors in one mission, but that's nothing. And while I did complain about the outdatedness of the mission design, the plot is actually relatively good, at least from a writing perspective, though it does feel a little cheesy at times. Still, I find that most shooter games have difficulties making a reasonable plot about two superpowers going to war, and Operation Flashpoint mostly succeeds at this. It's not fancy, there are no sudden plot twists, but makes enough sense not to break your immersion and keeps good pacing throughout the game. So would I recommend you play this mod? I would say this is probably one of the best single-player campaign mods you can download for ArmA 3, however it is a heavy undertaking to play it from start to finish, plus it is a campaign from 2001 as I've mentioned multiple times, no matter how much the graphics are updated. The story is not exceptional enough to stand on its own two legs, and the missions can be frustrating at times, even for an ArmA veteran. So my conclusion is, if you play ArmA regularly and have the dependency mods mostly downloaded already, sure, give it a try. If you want to play single-player campaigns in ArmA and have already exhausted Bohemia Interactive's own offerings, go ahead and give it a try. The mod is a very good recreation of the original game's campaign, and I would say you're better off playing this than Operation Flashpoint. But if you don't belong to one of those two categories, there's not much of a reason to dedicate 12 hours of your life to finishing this campaign. I enjoyed my time playing it, but I don't think most people would like it as much, especially if they're not used to ArmA 3's campaigns, how they play, and mostly spend their time playing COS. If you somehow ended up here without ever having played ArmA, well, not sure why YouTube recommended this video to you, but you should probably give the Eastwind campaign a shot before playing this if you ever do buy ArmA 3. It does go on sale pretty frequently for very cheap. That's all for me. If this video gets way more views than I'm expecting, I'll probably do a review of the other two Operation Flashpoint campaigns that were also modded into ArmA 3. Otherwise, expect me to upload a video on some other game at some point in the future. Depends on whether I think it'll make for a good video or not. And a quick channel update for any old subscribers. I have not played War Thunder since December last year, and the 2 video projects I had on it are unsurprisingly not being worked on anymore. I just don't enjoy the grind anymore, and I've burned out completely. The War Thunder videos on my channel will stay public, but don't expect me to make any future videos on the game. That's it for real this time. Like and sub. Goodbye.